The carriage wheels struck every rut in the muddy road, and each jolt sent pain through Elena's swollen belly. She pressed her hands against the rounded curve beneath her dark woolen dress, and tried not to think about what waited at Blackmore Castle. Her father had made his choice 3 months ago when he gambled away their estate. Now she would pay the price. "Lord Blackmore owns everything we had," her father had said, his voice hollow with shame. "Everything except you. But he's offered a bargain." The words still echoed in her mind like a death knell. "Give me your firstborn child, and I'll forgive the debt." A simple trade, a baby she carried for a man she had never met. Elena shifted on the hard seat and winced. The child moved restlessly inside her, as if sensing her fear. She had not told anyone the truth about the father. How could she explain that she had given her heart to a traveling merchant who promised to return for her? Thomas had dark eyes and gentle hands, and when he kissed her in the moonlight behind the old oak tree, she believed every word he spoke about their future together. That was 7 months ago. He never came back. The carriage lurched to a stop before massive iron gates. Elena peered through the small window and saw Blackmore Castle rising from the moor like a great stone beast. Towers stretched toward the grey sky, and narrow windows stared down at her like unblinking eyes. This would be her prison until the child was born.
"Miss Elena?"
The driver's voice was rough but kind. "We're here." She nodded and gathered her courage. The gate creaked open, and they rolled through into a courtyard filled with shadows. Servants appeared from doorways, their faces curious but carefully blank. Elena had heard whispers about the master of Blackmore. Lord Damien Cross was a man who had lost everything that mattered to him. His wife had died in childbirth 5 years ago, taking their son with her. Some said grief had turned his heart to stone. The castle doors opened before she could knock. A tall man stepped into the light, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. Lord Damien Cross was younger than she had expected, perhaps 30 years old, with black hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of a winter storm. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, giving his handsome face a dangerous edge. "Miss Whitmore." His voice was deep and cold as the stone walls around them. "You're late." "The roads were difficult, my lord." Elena lifted her chin and met his gaze, though her heart pounded like a trapped bird. "I came as quickly as I could." His eyes moved to her rounded belly, and something flickered across his face too quickly for her to read. "Indeed. Come inside. We have much to discuss." The great hall was filled with shadows and the scent of old wood and dying fires. Tapestries hung from the walls, their colors faded with age. Elena followed Lord Damien across the stone floor, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. He moved with the grace of a predator, every step controlled and deliberate. "You understand the terms of our agreement?" He turned to face her near a massive fireplace, where flames danced and cast strange shapes on his scarred features. "I understand that my father owes you a great deal of money." Elena kept her voice steady though her hands trembled. "And that you're willing to forgive his debt in exchange for my child." "Your firstborn child," he corrected. "The contract is quite specific." Heat rose in Elena's cheeks. "The child I carry is my firstborn, my lord." "So I see." His gaze dropped to her belly again, and this time she caught something that might have been pain in his expression. "When is the birth expected?" 2 months, perhaps less. Elena placed her hands protectively over her stomach. "The midwife in our village was not certain." Lord Damien moved to a table near the window and poured wine into a silver goblet. He did not offer her any. "You'll be comfortable here until then. Mrs. Crawford will see to your needs." He gestured toward an older woman who had appeared in the doorway like a silent ghost. "After the birth, you'll be free to go wherever you choose, and my child will remain here, as agreed." Elena felt the baby kick as if responding to the tension in her voice. "This is not what I wanted, my lord. What we want rarely matters." Lord Damien's voice was bitter as winter wind. "We do what we must to survive." She wanted to argue, to rage against the unfairness of it all, but the exhaustion of the long journey weighed on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Mrs. Crawford stepped forward with a gentle smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Come, dear, let me show you to your room. You need rest." Elena followed the housekeeper through corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Their painted eyes seemed to judge her as she passed. The room Mrs. Crawford led her to was larger than her entire cottage back home, with a four-poster bed draped in green velvet and a window that overlooked the moor. "Lord Damien has instructed me to provide whatever you need," Mrs. Crawford said, as she pulled back the heavy curtains to let in the pale afternoon light. "There's a bell pull beside the bed, if you require anything during the night." "Thank you." Elena sank onto the edge of the bed and felt the soft mattress yield beneath her weight. It had been months since she had slept on anything but straw. Mrs. Crawford hesitated at the door. "If I may say so, miss, his lordship is not the monster some believe him to be. Grief changes a man, but it doesn't always destroy his heart." After the housekeeper left, Elena lay back against the pillows and stared at the painted ceiling above her head. Angels and cherubs danced among clouds, their faces serene and untouched by earthly sorrow. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine Thomas's reaction if he knew where she was and what she had been forced to agree to. But Thomas was gone, and she was alone with a child whose future had been decided by men who saw her as nothing more than a vessel for their bargains. That evening, a maid brought her supper on a silver tray: roasted chicken and fresh bread, vegetables from the castle gardens, and sweet wine that warmed her empty stomach. It was more food than she had seen in weeks. Elena ate slowly and watched the sun set over the moor through her window. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, wild and beautiful and utterly isolated. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Lord Damien stood in the doorway, his tall figure outlined against the corridor's flickering torchlight. He had changed from his travel clothes into a dark jacket that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. "I wanted to ensure you had everything you needed." "Yes, my lord. Thank you." Elena set down her wine goblet and smoothed her skirts. "The room is very comfortable." He stepped inside, but remained near the door, as if afraid to come too close. "Mrs. Crawford tells me you refused her offer to have one of the maids help you dress and undress. I'm accustomed to caring for myself. That will change as your condition advances." His eyes lingered on her belly with an expression she could not interpret. "I won't have you endangering the child through stubborn pride." Heat flashed through Elena's chest. "The child is mine to protect, my lord, regardless of our agreement. Until it's born." His voice was cold again, but she caught something underneath that sounded almost like uncertainty. "After that, it becomes my responsibility." Do you truly believe a contract signed by desperate men can transfer a mother's love to a stranger? The words escaped before Elena could stop them, and she saw Lord Damien's jaw tighten. "Love is a luxury neither of us can afford, Miss Whitmore." He turned toward the door. "Rest well. Tomorrow we'll discuss the arrangements for your confinement." After he left, Elena pressed her hands against her belly and felt the child moving restlessly beneath her palms. "I won't let him take you," she whispered. "I don't know how, but I'll find a way." The next morning brought rain that drummed against the windows and turned the moor into a grey wasteland. Elena woke to find a breakfast tray waiting beside her bed, and clothes laid out across the chair by the fireplace. A deep blue dress of fine wool, far nicer than anything she had ever owned. Mrs. Crawford must have guessed her size from yesterday's meeting. When Elena made her way downstairs, she found Lord Damien in his study, a dark-panelled room lined with books and dominated by a massive oak desk. He looked up from the papers spread before him, and she noticed that his eyes were red-rimmed as if he had not slept. "I trust you rested well?" He gestured for her to take the chair across from his desk. "Yes, thank you." Elena settled carefully into the cushioned seat, grateful for its comfort. "The dress is beautiful. I'm not sure it's appropriate for someone in my position." "Your position is that of a guest in my home." Lord Damien set down his quill and leaned back in his chair. "You'll be treated as such for the duration of your stay. A guest who cannot leave. A guest who chooses not to leave." His smile was sharp as a blade. "The doors are not locked, Miss Whitmore. You're free to go whenever you wish. Of course that would void our agreement, and your father's debts would become due immediately." Elena's hands clenched in her lap. "You know I have no choice." "We all have choices. Some are simply more pleasant than others." Lord Damien picked up a sheet of parchment from his desk. "I've had the physician from the village examine your condition. Dr. Morrison believes the child will arrive sooner than you estimated, perhaps 6 weeks. You had no right. I have every right to protect my investment." The coldness in his voice made Elena shiver. "You'll see Dr. Morrison twice weekly from now on. Mrs. Crawford will ensure you eat properly and get adequate rest. There will be no more wandering about the castle unescorted." "Am I a prisoner then?" Lord Damien's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You're carrying a precious burden, Miss Whitmore. I won't risk losing another child to carelessness or misfortune." The pain in his voice caught Elena off guard. For a moment, the mask of cold control slipped, and she glimpsed the grief that lay beneath. "I'm sorry for your loss, my lord." His jaw tightened, and the wall went up again. "That's not your concern. Your only concern should be delivering a healthy child." "My child," Elena said quietly. "My child?" Lord Damien's eyes were hard as winter ice. "Never forget that, Miss Whitmore. The sooner you accept reality, the easier this will be for both of us." Elena left the study with tears burning behind her eyes and her heart hammering against her ribs. She walked through the castle's corridors without seeing them, her thoughts churning like storm clouds. How could she have been so foolish as to believe there might be compassion hidden beneath Lord Damien's stern exterior? The rain continued for 3 days, trapping Elena inside the castle walls with her growing anxiety and the child who moved restlessly in her womb, as if sensing her distress. She spent her time in the library, a vast room filled with more books than she had ever seen. Many were in languages she did not recognize, but she found volumes of poetry and stories that helped pass the lonely hours. On the 4th morning, the sun finally broke through the clouds, and Elena asked Mrs. Crawford for permission to walk in the gardens. The housekeeper agreed, but insisted that one of the groundskeepers accompany her. Elena did not argue. She was desperate for fresh air and the feeling of earth beneath her feet. The castle gardens were more beautiful than she had expected. Someone had planted them with care, creating winding paths between beds of roses and lavender, herbs and vegetables. An old stone fountain stood at the center, its basin filled with clear water that reflected the sky. "Her ladyship designed these gardens," said the groundskeeper, a weathered man named William, who walked beside her with careful respect. "Spent hours out here every day, she did, even when she was carrying the young master." Elena paused beside a bed of white roses. "What was she like?" William's face softened with memory. Kind as summer rain, miss. Always had a smile and a gentle word for everyone. His lordship was different then. Used to laugh. He did. Used to sing sometimes when he thought no one was listening. What happened to the child? Born too early. Tiny little thing, but perfect in every way. William's voice grew thick with old sorrow. Lived for 3 days. Her ladyship held him the whole time, singing lullabies and telling him stories. When he passed, something broke inside his lordship that never healed right. Elena touched her belly and felt her own child stir. How terrible for them both.
Aye.
And now he thinks your little one will fill that empty place in his heart. William shook his head. But you can't replace what's lost, can you, miss? Can't make new love from old grief. That evening, Elena sat by her window and watched the sunset paint the moor in shades of gold and crimson. The child was active tonight, turning and stretching as if trying to find a comfortable position in the increasingly cramped space. She rubbed gentle circles on her belly and hummed a lullaby her own mother had sung to her years ago. A soft knock interrupted her song. Elena expected to see Mrs. Crawford or one of the maids, but Lord Damien stood in the doorway with an uncertain expression on his scarred face.
May I come in?
Elena nodded, too surprised to speak. He entered the room and moved to the chair near the fireplace, but he did not sit down. Instead, he stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring into the flames. Mrs. Crawford tells me you've been spending time in the library. I hope that's acceptable. Elena turned from the window to face him. Reading helps pass the time. Of course, the books are there to be enjoyed. Lord Damien glanced at her, then quickly looked away. I noticed you were reading Chaucer yesterday. The Canterbury Tales. I'd never seen a complete copy before. Elena smiled despite herself. Some of the stories are quite scandalous. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Lord Damien's features. My wife enjoyed those tales as well. She said they reminded her that people have always been complicated creatures, regardless of the age they live in. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. Lord Damien's voice grew soft with memory. Catherine saw beauty in everything. Even in me, though God knows why. Elena watched the play of firelight across his face and noticed how the scar seemed to fade when his expression was unguarded. She loved you. That's reason enough. Love. Lord Damien spoke the word like a foreign language. Catherine believed love could overcome any obstacle. I learned too late that some obstacles are stronger than love. Perhaps love isn't meant to overcome obstacles, Elena said quietly. Perhaps it's meant to help us bear them. Lord Damien turned to look at her fully, and for a moment the walls around his heart seemed to crack. You speak like someone who has loved deeply. Heat rose in Elena's cheeks. I thought I had. I was wrong. The father of your child. Elena nodded, unable to trust her voice. Did he know about the child when he left? No. The word came out as barely a whisper. I discovered my condition after he was gone. I kept hoping he would return, but hope is a dangerous thing. Lord Damien's voice was gentle now, without the cold edge that usually sharpened his words. It makes fools of us all. They stood in silence for several moments, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the wind outside the window. Elena felt the child kick and pressed her hand to the spot, wincing slightly at the force of the movement. Is everything all right? Lord Damien stepped toward her, concern replacing the careful distance he usually maintained. The baby is just restless tonight. Elena rubbed the spot where a tiny foot was pressing against her ribs. Sometimes I think it's trying to dance. May I? Lord Damien stopped himself and stepped back. Forgive me. That was inappropriate. What were you going to ask? Lord Damien's hands clenched at his sides. I wondered if I could feel the child move. I never had the chance with Catherine. She was so ill during her pregnancy that I was afraid to touch her. Elena saw the longing in his eyes, the desperate hunger for something he had lost before he could truly experience it. Against her better judgment, she felt a stab of sympathy for this man who would take her child, but who had never known the joy of feeling his own baby move beneath his hand. "You may," she said softly. Lord Damien approached her slowly, as if she were a wild creature that might bolt at any sudden movement. He stopped just in front of her, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of sandalwood and leather that clung to his clothes.
"Are you certain?"
Elena nodded and took his hand, guiding it to the spot where the child was most active. His palm was warm and calloused, the hand of a man who worked with his horses and knew the weight of a sword. She pressed it gently against her belly and waited. The baby kicked immediately, a strong movement that made Lord Damien's eyes widen with wonder. "Dear God," he breathed. "It's so strong." The midwife in our village said that was a good sign. Elena watched his face transform as the child continued to move beneath his touch. The harsh lines softened, and something like joy flickered in his storm-grey eyes. "It's incredible." Lord Damien's voice was filled with awe. "How do you bear it, this constant reminder of the miracle you're carrying?" "Sometimes it's frightening," Elena admitted, "to know that someone so small depends on me completely. But mostly it's—" She searched for the right word. "It's like carrying hope itself." Lord Damien's hand stilled on her belly, and when he looked up at her, Elena saw tears glittering in his eyes. I had forgotten what hope felt like. The moment stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Elena found herself studying the angles of his face, the way the firelight caught in his dark hair, the vulnerability he was trying so hard to hide. This was not the cold, calculating man who had demanded her child in payment for her father's debts. This was someone who had loved deeply and lost everything, someone who was drowning in grief and grasping for anything that might pull him back to the surface. "Lord Damien," she whispered, not sure what she wanted to say. He jerked his hand away as if her skin had burned him and stepped back, the walls slamming down around his heart again. "Forgive me, that was inappropriate. It won't happen again." "There's nothing to forgive. Good night, Miss Whitmore." Lord Damien strode toward the door without looking back. "Mrs. Crawford will bring your breakfast in the morning." After he left, Elena sank into the chair by the fire and pressed her hands to her belly. The child had quieted now, as if sensing the change in her mood. She thought about the wonder in Lord Damien's eyes when he felt the baby move, the way his entire being had seemed to come alive for those few precious moments. He was not the monster she had expected. He was something far more dangerous, a man whose grief had made him desperate enough to steal her child, but whose heart was not entirely lost to darkness. Elena closed her eyes and tried not to think about what that might mean for all of them. The next few weeks passed in a strange rhythm of quiet days and sleepless nights. Elena's body grew heavier as the child pressed closer to birth, and Dr. Morrison's visits became more frequent. The physician was a kind man with gentle hands and worried eyes, who spoke to Elena as if she were a person rather than simply a vessel for Lord Damien's hopes. "The child is in the proper position," he told her during his latest examination. "Strong heartbeat, good size. I expect the birth within the next 2 weeks." Elena nodded and tried to ignore the fear that clenched around her heart like a fist. 2 weeks. 2 weeks before she would hold her child in her arms and then be forced to give it away forever. Lord Damien had avoided her since the night he felt the baby move. When their paths crossed in the corridors, he nodded politely and continued on his way without speaking. Elena told herself she was relieved by his distance, but she found herself listening for his footsteps and looking for glimpses of him through the windows when he rode out across the moor. One afternoon, as she sat reading in the library, she heard raised voices from the direction of the great hall. Elena set down her book and moved carefully to the doorway, her curiosity overcoming her usual caution. "You cannot be serious about this madness, Damien." The voice belonged to a man Elena had never met. Someone with the cultured accent of the nobility. Taking a child from its mother. It's barbaric. The child's mother agreed to the arrangement. Lord Damien's voice was cold as winter stone. "The contract is legal and binding." Legal, perhaps, but hardly moral. The stranger's voice rose with anger. "What would Catherine think of what you've become?" Elena heard something crash, possibly a glass thrown against the wall. "Don't you dare speak my wife's name," Lord Damien snarled. "Catherine is dead, Charles. Dead because I couldn't protect her or our son. I won't fail again. This isn't protection, it's obsession. You're trying to fill a hole in your soul with someone else's child, and it will destroy you both. Get out." Lord Damien's voice was deadly quiet now. "Get out of my house and don't come back." Elena heard footsteps approaching the library and quickly returned to her chair, her heart pounding. A moment later, a tall man with greying hair and kind eyes appeared in the doorway. He looked at her with obvious concern and something that might have been pity. "You must be Miss Whitmore." He moved into the room and offered her a slight bow. "I'm Charles Blackwood, Lord Damien's cousin and oldest friend." "Sir Charles." Elena set down her book and started to rise, but he waved her back into her seat. "Please, don't trouble yourself. I can see you're close to your time." Charles pulled up a chair and sat across from her, his expression grave. "I've just come from speaking with my cousin. I felt I should warn you. He's not thinking clearly about this situation." "I'm not sure what you mean, sir." Charles leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "Damien believes that having your child will heal the wounds. Catherine's death left in his heart. But grief doesn't work that way, Miss Whitmore. You can't replace what's lost. You can only learn to live with the emptiness." Elena's hands moved protectively to her belly. "And what would you have me do? My father's debts are real. If I break the agreement, he'll lose everything. There are other ways to settle debts. Money can be found. Arrangements made." Charles's eyes were earnest and desperate. "But once you give up your child, Miss Whitmore, there's no going back. Damien will never let you see the baby again. He'll convince himself that you're a threat to his happiness. He told me I could leave after the birth." "Leave, yes, but he didn't say you could take your child with you, did he?" Charles shook his head sadly. "I've known Damien since we were boys. He's a good man at heart, but grief has twisted his thinking. He sees your child as his salvation, and he'll fight anyone who tries to take that hope away from him." Elena felt the baby kick as if responding to her rising panic. "What am I supposed to do? I have nowhere to go. No money, no family except my father." "I can help you." Charles reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather purse. "There's enough gold here to get you far from Blackmore, enough to start a new life for you and your child." Elena stared at the purse but didn't reach for it. "And my father's debts. I'll find a way to settle them. Damien may hate me for it now, but someday he'll thank me for saving him from this madness." The sound of approaching footsteps made them both look toward the doorway. Lord Damien appeared like a thundercloud, his face dark with fury. "I told you to leave, Charles. I was just making Miss Whitmore's acquaintance." Charles rose slowly, his hand still extended toward Elena with the purse of gold. "A charming young woman. You must be very excited about the upcoming birth. What I am is tired of your interference." Lord Damien stepped into the room, his presence filling the space like a gathering storm. "Miss Whitmore, I apologize for my cousin's inappropriate behavior. He was just leaving." Elena looked between the two men and felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her shoulders. Charles's offer represented freedom for her and her child, but it would mean her father's ruin and possibly Lord Damien's destruction as well. She could see the desperate hope in Lord Damien's eyes, the way he looked at her belly as if it contained his entire future. "Thank you for your kind offer, Sir Charles," she said quietly, "but I cannot accept it." Charles's face fell with disappointment and something that looked like grief. "Miss Whitmore, please reconsider. Once the child is born, the child will remain here where it belongs." Lord Damien moved to stand behind Elena's chair, his hand coming to rest on the carved wooden back just inches from her shoulder. "The agreement stands." Charles stared at Elena for a long moment, then shook his head sadly. "I pray you won't regret this decision, my dear." He looked at Lord Damien with eyes full of sorrow. "And I pray that someday you'll forgive me for what I'm about to do." Before Lord Damien could respond, Charles strode from the room, leaving Elena alone with her captor and the terrible certainty that she had just sealed her fate. What did he mean? Elena turned in her chair to look up at Lord Damien. What is he going to do? Lord Damien's jaw was tight with suppressed anger. Charles has always been dramatic. He'll sulk for a few weeks, and then find some new cause to champion. But Elena caught the uncertainty in his voice, the way his eyes followed the direction his cousin had gone. That night, Elena lay awake, listening to the wind howl across the moor, and feeling her child move restlessly in her womb. The baby seemed larger now, pressing against her ribs and making it difficult to find a comfortable position. Dr. Morrison had warned her that the birth could begin at any time, and the knowledge filled her with equal parts anticipation and dread. She thought about Charles's offer and wondered if she had made the right choice. The gold in his purse could have bought her freedom, but it would have come at the cost of her father's ruin and possibly Lord Damien's sanity. She had seen the fragile hope in his eyes when he felt the baby move, the way he spoke of Catherine and their lost son. Taking that away from him seemed almost cruel, even though keeping her child would destroy her own heart. A soft knock interrupted her troubled thoughts. Elena expected to see Mrs. Crawford with her nightly cup of warm milk, but Lord Damien stood in the doorway with a tray in his hands. "Mrs. Crawford is feeling unwell tonight," he said, stepping into the room with obvious uncertainty. "I thought you might like some tea." Elena struggled to sit up against her pillows, her movements clumsy with the weight of the child. Lord Damien set the tray on the small table beside her bed and turned to go. "Please don't leave," Elena said, before she could stop herself. "I mean, if you have time. The nights are long, and I find it difficult to sleep." Lord Damien hesitated, then moved to the chair by the fireplace. He sat on the edge of the seat as if ready to flee at any moment. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Morrison seemed concerned during his last visit. "Tired. Anxious." Elena poured tea from the delicate porcelain pot and breathed in the soothing scent of chamomile. "The baby is very active tonight. I don't think it likes being so cramped. It won't be much longer now." "No." Elena set down her teacup and looked directly at Lord Damien. "What will happen after the birth? Will you really let me leave?" Lord Damien's hands clenched on the arms of his chair. "That was our agreement. But where will I go? I have no money, no prospects. My reputation will be ruined when word spreads that I bore a child out of wedlock. You could marry, find a man who would accept your past and give you a future." The suggestion struck Elena like a physical blow. How could I marry when my heart would always belong to the child I left behind? How could I lie beside another man knowing that somewhere in this castle my baby was crying for me? Lord Damien flinched as if she had struck him. The child will be well cared for. It will want for nothing, except its mother's love. Love isn't everything, but Lord Damien's voice lacked conviction. Security, education, a good name, these things matter more than sentiment. Do they? Elena leaned forward, ignoring the discomfort in her back. Is that what you would have wanted for your son? A father who provided everything except love? I would have loved my son. The words came out as a growl, raw with old pain. I would have given him everything. Then why do you think you can love my child when you refuse to let yourself care for its mother? The question hung in the air between them like a sword. Lord Damien stared at Elena with something like shock in his eyes, as if she had voiced a truth he had never allowed himself to consider. That's different, he said finally, but his voice was uncertain. Is it? Or are you trying to steal not just my child, but the love that should be mine to give? Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You cannot separate a child from its mother's heart, my lord. Even if you take my baby from my arms, it will always carry part of me, and I will always carry part of it. Lord Damien rose abruptly and moved to the window, his broad shoulders tense with suppressed emotion. You don't understand. I can't lose another child. I won't survive it. But you're willing to destroy me to save yourself. He turned back to her, and Elena saw that his eyes were bright with unshed tears. You're young, you'll recover, you'll find someone else to love, have other children. Will I? Or will I spend the rest of my life as you have, locked away from the world because the pain of loving is too great to bear? Elena struggled to stand, her hand pressed to her aching back. Look at yourself, my lord. Look at what grief has made you. Is that the fate you wish for me? Lord Damien crossed the room in 3 quick strides and caught Elena's arm as she swayed on her feet. You should be in bed. This conversation is too upsetting. The truth is often upsetting. Elena looked up into his face and saw the war being fought behind his eyes. But running from it doesn't make it disappear. His hand was warm on her arm, his touch gentle despite the tension in his face. For a moment, Elena thought she saw something crack in the wall around his heart. Then the child kicked hard enough to take her breath away, and Lord Damien's attention shifted immediately to her belly. Are you in pain? No, just, oh. Elena pressed both hands to her stomach as another strong movement rippled across her abdomen. The baby is definitely ready to make its appearance. Lord Damien helped her back onto the bed, his movements careful and protective. Should I send for Dr. Morrison? Not yet. This is normal for the final weeks. Elena settled against her pillows and watched Lord Damien's face as he stared at her rounded belly. Would you like to feel it again? The question seemed to startle him. I shouldn't. Why not? In a few days, you'll have every right to touch this child. Why not now, while it's still part of me? Lord Damien's internal struggle was visible in the play of emotions across his scarred features. Finally, he sat on the edge of the bed and placed his hand on Elena's belly. The baby responded immediately, pushing against his palm with what felt like determination. It's so strong, he murmured, wonder replacing the tension in his voice. The midwife said strong babies have the best chance of surviving birth. Elena covered his hand with hers, feeling the warmth of his skin through the thin fabric of her nightgown. Your son was born too early? Lord Damien nodded, his attention focused on the movement beneath his hand. 8 months. He was perfect, just too small. Catherine held him for 3 days, never sleeping, never eating. She sang to him and told him stories and begged him to stay with us. But he couldn't. No, he was too weak. Lord Damien's voice broke slightly. When he died, Catherine followed him within hours. The physician said her heart simply stopped. She couldn't bear to live in a world without her child. Elena felt tears slip down her cheeks as she imagined the young couple's tragedy. "I'm so sorry." I held them both while they grew cold. Lord Damien's hand trembled against her belly. My wife and my son, gone before I could save either of them. I swore that night that I would never be helpless again. "So you decided to take someone else's child rather than risk your own heart again?" Lord Damien's eyes snapped to hers, anger flaring in their depths. "This child will be mine, legally completely mine, but not born from love. Not created by two people who wanted it more than life itself." Elena squeezed his hand, willing him to understand. "You're trying to buy what cannot be purchased, steal what can only be given freely. I don't need the child to love me. I just need it to live. And what kind of life will that be? Growing up with a father who sees it as a replacement for what he lost rather than a miracle in its own right." Elena felt the baby kick again, a sharp movement that made her wince. Children know when they're not truly wanted for themselves. Lord Damien pulled his hand away as if her skin had burned him. "You're trying to manipulate me, using my grief against me. I'm trying to save us all from a mistake that will destroy everyone involved." Elena struggled to sit up, her back aching with the baby's weight. "Keep me here, raise this child as your own, and you'll have a constant reminder of what you stole. Every time you look at its face, you'll see its mother's eyes. Every time it cries, you'll wonder if it's calling for the woman you sent away." "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? I can see it in your face even now. You're already wondering if you can go through with this." Elena reached for his hand, but he pulled back. "It's not too late to change course, my lord. There are other ways to heal a broken heart." Lord Damien stood abruptly and moved toward the door. "The agreement stands, Miss Whitmore. Don't mistake a moment of weakness for a change of heart." After he left, Elena lay back against her pillows and tried to calm the storm of emotions churning in her chest. The baby was quieter now, as if exhausted by the evening's drama. She pressed her hands to her belly and whispered softly to the child within. "I don't know what's going to happen to us, little one, but I promise I'll fight for you until my last breath. You deserve better than to be the bandage for someone else's wounds." The next morning brought news that sent the entire castle into chaos. One of the stable boys had ridden hard through the night to deliver a message from the village. Dr. Morrison had been called away to attend a difficult birth and would not be able to return to Blackmore for at least 3 days. Elena felt a stab of fear as Mrs. Crawford delivered the news. Her back had been aching since she woke, and the baby seemed to be pressing lower in her womb. The signs all pointed to an imminent birth, and now she would face it without the physician's skilled hands to guide the child safely into the world. "Don't you worry, dear," Mrs. Crawford said, though Elena caught the concern in the housekeeper's eyes. "I've helped deliver more babies than I can count. Your little one will be in good hands." Lord Damien appeared in the doorway of Elena's room, while Mrs. Crawford was preparing the birth chamber. His face was pale beneath his tan, and his hands shook slightly as he gripped the doorframe. "Is it true? The birth has begun?" Elena nodded, unable to speak around the pain that gripped her lower back. The contractions were still far apart, but they were growing stronger with each passing hour. "I've sent riders to 3 neighboring villages," Lord Damien said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Someone will find a physician or midwife who can come immediately. There may not be time." Elena breathed through another contraction, her hands clenched on the sheets. Babies come when they choose to, not when it's convenient for us. Lord Damien stepped into the room, his usual composure cracking like thin ice. This can't happen now, not without proper medical care. I won't lose another child. Elena saw the terror in his eyes and felt an unexpected wave of compassion for this man who had already endured so much loss. Mrs. Crawford is very capable. She delivered half the children in the village. But what if something goes wrong? What if Lord Damien's voice broke? And he pressed his hands to his face. God help me, I can't go through this again. Elena struggled to stand and moved carefully to where he stood trembling by the door. She placed her hand on his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles beneath the fine fabric of his shirt. Look at me, she said softly. Lord Damien lowered his hands, and Elena saw that his eyes were bright with unshed tears. This is not your wife's birth, she said firmly. This is not your son. This child is healthy and strong, and it will be born safely into your arms. You don't know that. You can't promise that. No, I can't, but I can promise that I will fight with everything I have to bring this baby safely into the world. Elena felt another contraction building and gripped his arm for support. We have to have faith, my lord. It's all we have. Lord Damien covered her hand with his touch warm and surprisingly gentle. I'm frightened, Elena. I don't think I can bear to lose another child. It was the first time he had used her given name, and something in his voice made her heart clench with unexpected tenderness. This was not the cold, calculating man who had demanded her child as payment for her father's debts. This was someone stripped bare by grief and terror, as vulnerable as the baby she carried. You won't lose this child, she whispered. I promise you that. The contraction peaked, stronger than any before it, and Elena doubled over with a gasp of pain. Lord Damien caught her as she swayed, his arms strong and sure around her trembling body. Mrs. Crawford, he called urgently. The baby is coming. The next several hours passed in a blur of pain and exhaustion and desperate hope. Mrs. Crawford proved to be everything she had promised, guiding Elena through each contraction with patient skill and gentle encouragement. Lord Damien remained in the room despite the housekeeper's protests, holding Elena's hand and whispering words of comfort when the pain grew too fierce to bear. I can see the head, Mrs. Crawford announced as the sun began to set outside the windows. One more push, dear. Your baby is almost here. Elena gathered the last of her strength and bore down with everything she had. She felt the child slip from her body in a rush of fluid and relief, and then the room filled with the most beautiful sound in the world, a baby's first cry. It's a girl, Mrs. Crawford said through her tears of joy. A perfect, beautiful girl. Elena collapsed back against the pillows, her body shaking with exhaustion and overwhelming emotion. Through the haze of her fatigue, she saw Mrs. Crawford cleaning the baby and wrapping her in soft blankets. The infant's cries were strong and indignant, filling the room with proof of her healthy lungs. Let me see her, Elena whispered. Mrs. Crawford placed the bundle in Elena's arms, and the world seemed to stop spinning. The baby was perfect, tiny but well-formed, with a cap of dark hair and eyes that seemed to look directly into Elena's soul. When Elena touched the baby's cheek, the crying stopped, and the infant turned toward her mother's voice with instinctive recognition. Hello, my darling, Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. I've been waiting so long to meet you. She looked up to find Lord Damien standing frozen beside the bed, his face white with shock and wonder. His eyes were fixed on the baby with an expression of desperate longing that made Elena's heart ache. Would you like to hold her? She asked softly. Lord Damien's hands trembled as he reached for the baby. Elena placed her daughter carefully in his arms, watching as his face transformed with awe and terror, and something that looked like the beginning of love. She's so small, he breathed, but strong. Listen to those lungs. Elena smiled through her tears as the baby whimpered and waved her tiny fists. She knows exactly what she wants. Lord Damien's finger traced the baby's cheek with infinite gentleness. She's beautiful, perfect. Elena watched him fall in love with her daughter and felt her heart breaking and healing at the same time. This was what she had hoped for and feared. The moment when the child became real to him. Not just a replacement for his loss, but a person in her own right. What will you name her? Elena asked. Lord Damien looked up, and she saw tears glittering in his eyes. I thought, that is, I hoped, would Rose be acceptable? It was Catherine's favorite flower. Elena thought of the white roses in the castle garden, the ones Catherine had planted with such love and care. Rose is a beautiful name. Mrs. Crawford bustled around them, cleaning up the aftermath of birth and checking on Elena's condition. You did wonderfully, dear. The baby is healthy and you're healing well. You should rest now. But Elena couldn't take her eyes off Lord Damien and her daughter. The baby had quieted in his arms, seeming to sense his gentle strength. When Rose opened her eyes and looked up at him, something broke open in Lord Damien's face, all the walls he had built around his heart crumbling in an instant. Hello, little Rose, he whispered. I'm going to take such good care of you. Elena closed her eyes and felt the weight of her sacrifice settle on her shoulders like a shroud. In 3 days, maybe less, she would have to walk away from this room and leave her daughter in the arms of a man who would love her, but could never replace the bond between mother and child. But for now, Rose was here, and safe and perfect. For now, that was enough. The next morning, Elena woke to find sunlight streaming through her windows, and the sound of her daughter's hungry cries from the cradle Mrs. Crawford had placed beside the bed. The baby was wrapped in a soft yellow blanket, her tiny face red with indignation at being kept waiting for her breakfast. Good morning, sweetheart, Elena murmured as she lifted Rose from the cradle. The baby quieted immediately at her mother's voice, nuzzling instinctively toward Elena's breast. As Rose nursed, Elena studied every detail of her daughter's face. The delicate curve of her ears, the way her dark lashes lay against her cheeks, the tiny birthmark on her left shoulder that looked like a crescent moon. She tried to memorize everything, knowing that soon these moments would exist only in her memory. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Lord Damien stood in the doorway with a tea tray, his hair disheveled as if he had slept poorly. Mrs. Crawford is still feeling unwell, he said, setting the tray on the table beside Elena's bed. I brought your breakfast. Thank you. Elena adjusted Rose's position and noticed how Lord Damien's eyes followed every movement. How are you this morning? I didn't sleep much. Lord Damien pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down, his gaze fixed on the baby. I kept thinking about last night, about how fragile she seemed when she was born. All babies seem fragile at first, but Rose is strong. You can feel it when you hold her. May I? The request was barely a whisper. Elena lifted Rose from her breast and handed her to Lord Damien. The baby's stomach was full now, and she was drowsy and content. She settled into his arms with complete trust, her tiny fist curling around his finger. She knows you, Elena observed. How is that possible? She's only hours old. Babies know more than we think they do. She heard your voice while I carried her, felt your hand on my belly when she moved. Elena watched Lord Damien's face soften as Rose made a small sound of contentment. She recognizes safety when she feels it. Lord Damien's voice was thick with emotion when he spoke. I never thought I would feel this way again. When Catherine died, I believed my heart had died with her. Hearts don't die, my lord. They just build walls to protect themselves from more pain. And what happens when those walls come down? Elena smiled sadly. Sometimes they let in more pain, but they also let in more love. Rose stirred in Lord Damien's arms and opened her eyes, staring up at him with the unfocused gaze of a newborn. He spoke to her in soft tones, telling her about the castle and the gardens and the horses in the stable. Elena watched them together and felt her resolve wavering like a candle in the wind. How could she take this child away from a man who already loved her so completely? But how could she live with herself if she abandoned her daughter to ease her own conscience? Elena, Lord Damien's voice drew her from her tortured thoughts. I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Elena nodded, afraid to trust her voice. Do you truly want to leave Rose here? Or are you only staying because of the contract? The question hit Elena like a physical blow. She stared at Lord Damien's face, searching for some hint of what he wanted her to say, but his expression was carefully neutral. I don't know how to answer that, she whispered finally. Honestly, that's all I ask. Elena looked down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. The contract says I must give up my child, but my heart says I should fight to keep her, no matter the cost. And if there were no contract, if your father's debts were forgiven and you were free to choose. Elena's head snapped up, hope and fear warring in her chest. What are you saying? Lord Damien's arms tightened protectively around Rose. I'm saying that watching you with her, seeing the love in your eyes, I'm beginning to understand what Charles meant about replacing what's lost. I don't understand. Rose isn't my son. She isn't Catherine's child. She's yours, born from your body and your sacrifice. Lord Damien's voice was quiet but steady. I thought I could take her and make her mine, but love doesn't work that way, does it? Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes. Are you saying you'll let me take her? I'm saying I don't know what I'm saying. Lord Damien stood and began pacing the room, Rose still cradled securely in his arms. All I know is that when I hold her, I feel complete for the first time in 5 years. But when I look at you, I see a mother's heart breaking, and I wonder what kind of man that makes me. A man who has suffered too much loss to think clearly about anything else. Lord Damien stopped pacing and turned to face her. Help me think clearly then. Tell me what you really want, not what the contract demands or what you think I want to hear. Elena closed her eyes and tried to find the courage to speak her truth. I want to keep my daughter. I want to raise her and love her and watch her grow into the woman she's meant to become. She opened her eyes and met Lord Damien's gaze. But I also want her to have a father who will love her and protect her and give her all the advantages I could never provide alone. You want us both to be her parents. I want what's best for Rose, even if it means my own heart has to break. Lord Damien stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression like clouds parting to reveal the sun. What if it didn't have to break? What if there was another way? Elena's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean? What if you stayed? Not as my captive or the fulfillment of a contract, but as... Lord Damien struggled with the words. As Rose's mother and my... Your what? My wife. The words hung in the air between them, like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Elena stared at Lord Damien in shock, her mind reeling with the implications of what he was suggesting. You don't mean that, she whispered. Don't I? Lord Damien moved closer to the bed, Rose still sleeping peacefully in his arms. You said children need parents who love them. Rose already has that. She has you, who carried her and birthed her and would die for her, and she has me, who will never let any harm come to her. But we don't love each other. Lord Damien's eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her heart race. Don't we? When I felt Rose move beneath your skin, when I saw you fight to bring her safely into the world, when I watched you hold her with such perfect tenderness. He paused, his voice growing soft. I felt something I thought had died with Catherine. Not the same love, but something new, something that belongs only to you. Elena felt her world shifting on its axis. Damien, I know it's madness. I know I have no right to ask after everything I've put you through. Lord Damien sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that Elena could see the hope and fear battling in his eyes. But Rose deserves to have both her parents, and maybe we deserve a chance to build something beautiful from the ashes of our separate griefs. Elena looked at her daughter, sleeping so peacefully in the arms of the man who had threatened to steal her away. Rose's tiny face was serene, as if she understood that the adults around her were finally finding their way to the truth. What about the contract? My father's debts. The contract becomes meaningless if we marry. Your father's debts will be forgiven as part of my wedding gift to you. Damien's free hand reached out to cover hers. Say yes, Elena. Say you'll stay and be Rose's mother, and my wife. Elena stared down at their joined hands and felt the last of her defenses crumble. I'm frightened, she admitted. What if this is just gratitude talking? What if you wake up tomorrow and regret tying yourself to a woman of no fortune or family? What if you wake up tomorrow and regret tying yourself to a scarred, bitter man who tried to steal your child? Damien countered. Love always requires a leap of faith, Elena. The question is whether you trust me enough to jump. Elena looked into his eyes and saw not the cold, calculating lord who had brought her to Blackmore, but a man who had found his way back from the edge of despair through the miracle of her daughter's birth. She saw someone who could love deeply and fiercely, someone who would protect Rose with his life and maybe, just maybe, learn to love her mother with equal devotion. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Damien's face transformed with joy and relief. He leaned forward and kissed her softly, a gentle brush of lips that tasted like promises and new beginnings. Rose stirred between them and made a small sound of contentment, as if blessing their decision. Thank you, Damien whispered against Elena's lips. Thank you for giving me a second chance at happiness. Elena smiled through her tears. Thank you for giving Rose a father who will love her as much as I do. Outside the window, the sun climbed higher in the sky, burning away the morning mist and revealing the beauty of the moor in all its wild glory. Elena thought of her father and wondered what he would say when he received word that his daughter had married Lord Damien Cross. She thought of Charles and hoped he would understand that sometimes the best solutions were the ones no one saw coming. But mostly she thought of the future, of watching Rose take her first steps in the castle gardens, of teaching her to read in the library, of seeing Damien's face light up when their daughter called him Papa for the first time. It would not be the life Elena had dreamed of when she was young and foolish enough to believe in fairy tales, but it would be something rarer and more precious, a love born from sacrifice and strengthened by shared devotion to the tiny miracle sleeping peacefully between them. I love you, Elena said, the words surprising her with their truth. Damien's eyes filled with tears. And I love you, both of you, more than I ever thought possible. Rose opened her eyes at the sound of her parents' voices and looked up at them with perfect trust. Elena reached out to stroke her daughter's soft cheek, and Damien covered her hand with his. In that moment, Elena knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The debt had been forgiven, the contract fulfilled in ways none of them had expected, and from the ashes of old grief, a new family had been born. The story that had begun with a desperate bargain had become something beautiful, a tale of love found in the most unlikely places, of hearts healed by the courage to hope again, of a child who brought two wounded souls together and showed them that sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones we never knew we were looking for. And as the sun set over Blackmore Castle that evening, casting golden light through the windows of the nursery where Lord and Lady Cross sat watching their daughter sleep, Elena whispered a prayer of gratitude for the mysterious ways that love finds a way to triumph, even in the darkest of circumstances. Their story was just beginning, but already Elena knew it would be one worth telling, a tale of forgiveness and second chances, of a debt that became a blessing, and of a love that grew from the